The call to order. Welcome to the Finance and Audit Commission January 18th regular meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with the Finance and Audit Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in the downtown conference room and participating remotely. We'll start with roll call. I would like to introduce staff and Finance and Audit Commission members present. Lynn Bramlett, Susanna Hill, Jeff LaRoe, Matt Normington, Susan Prohaska, and myself, Carol Wong. Staff present include Administrative Services Director Brittany Mello, Assistant Administrative Services Director Jared Hansen. Hello, nice to meet you. Interim Finance and Budget Manager Ronnie Singh, Senior Accountant Ying Chen, and Management and Analyst Adrian Patina. Adrian, would you please provide instructions to the Finance and Audit Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
All right. Thank you, Chair Wong and the members of the Finance and Audit Commission. Welcome everyone to the January 18th regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Commission, and thank you for attending. Staff will engage in webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the Finance and Audit Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on an item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, for virtual participants, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of the screen. For those who are calling in from a landline or from a cell phone, please press *9. And for those in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to staff. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
Under public comment, the public may address the Finance and Audit Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the advisory body cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. So nothing that is not on the agenda, just for clarification.
All right. So for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide a public comment for an item that is not on tonight's agenda, please use the raise hand feature if you are logged in remotely. If you are calling from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment, and there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you. We will begin this evening with the presentation. Staff liaison Adrian, do we have any public comment on the presentations and proclamations?
All right, if you would like to provide a public comment for agenda item B1, presentation on grants by California Consulting, Inc., please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Please press *9 if you are dialing in from a landline or from a cell phone. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. And there are no requests for public comment at this time. You may continue.
To introduce this item, can we have Administrative Services Director Brittany Mello move this forward?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So good evening, Commissioners. We're excited to be able to share a little bit more about the grant work that we've been doing here at the city. Before I begin, I just want to formally introduce Jared Hansen, our new Assistant Admin Services Director.
Welcome.
This is his third day with the city, and so we wanted
I showed up again today.
So just wanted to share with him, as he's our head of finance, really will be able to help answer questions you may have related to finance of the city. So
But I don't know a lot yet, so don't. It's just day 3.
And so we're excited to have our consultants from California Consulting here with us to talk more about the grant-related services that they're providing to the city. Before we hand it over for their presentation, we wanted to just share some exciting information on what city staff have accomplished thus far related to grant funding. So as the commission likely suspects, the process of searching for grant opportunities, determining which grants would best suit the city's needs and help meet the goals, writing a grant application and complying with various data and other reporting requirements when we're able to receive a grant is a very time-intensive process. So we have staff in each of our departments leading these efforts and working to coordinate the grant applications and awards across the city. So I'm really pleased to be able to share with you the fruits of all of our terrific staff's work in the grant arena. So if you don't mind, Staff Liaison Patina, bringing up our slide, and we did print it out. I didn't want to give away the exciting numbers before we put it up on the screen. So we really wanted to highlight with this information how grants continue to be an important component to the city's overall budget strategy. Hello, Commissioner. So as of November 2023, I'm pleased to share that the city has $84.2 million in total grant awards. This is including grants such as the FEMA Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC grant, and a community electrification grant from the California Electrification Commission. So before you are the current total grant awards by department. You can see Public Works takes the cake with $77.9 million. Obviously, Public Works is in charge of the city's infrastructure, and there's a lot of different levels of government that help support our infrastructure with Public Works related grants. Our Library and Community Services Department has $3.4 million of current grants. General Administration is $2.3 million. Community Development is $300,000.3 million, and Police is $0.2 million. So these figures represent our active grants. So most of these large grants span multiple fiscal years, and they can come from the county, state, federal government, or other kind of niche areas that are supporting a particular topic. So we have them for very specific uses. And sometimes when we receive a grant, the city does have to provide some amount of matching funds. Sometimes that can be in kind with our staff time, but it's normally not free money. There's some effort or actual dollars that have to be matched to be able to receive these grants. Sometimes you'll see the grant resolutions going before the city council. That's why, because we're committing those resources. And so we need city council to approve that. And not all of these awarded funds have currently been dispersed to the city at this point in time, just as an effort. So, we receive these on a rolling basis, and then we have different reporting and other deadlines that we have to comply with. So I really just was so pleased to share this exciting information with you all to help give you some context. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our California Consulting folks who are here with us on Zoom to share more about the work that they are doing as a company, the expertise they bring, and what they're doing specifically for the city.
And how long have they been working for the city?
I believe they came on board maybe 3 months or so ago, but I bet they would know. Hello, David. We see that you are muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Brittany, commissioners, thank you for the invitation. It's me. I'll probably be doing most of the talking, and Kareen, one of our grant writers assigned to work with Menlo. So I want to thank you for the invitation, and throughout this presentation, don't hesitate to ask questions during the presentation. I consider PowerPoint presentation sort of like a tool to help facilitate discussions. And so glad we started here, and glad to provide you an overview, as well as providing maybe some detail also on not so much on the grant writing strategy, but on the grant selection and the grant development process and strategy specific with Menlo Park. So if we can proceed on to the next. Okay. So yeah, just a kind of a background of who we are and in case there's not a familiarity with our organization. And so it was started in 2004. So there's tremendous amount of experience. We have writers from California. We have grant writers and managers from outside of California. We believe by hiring personnel from beyond California, we can get some of the, how would I say, bright talent out there. So it's not limited, and we now live in a world where that's remote for the most part, though. We do encourage that our writer, don't encourage, actually what it becomes is that the writers that are assigned is excuse my dog, is excuse me, become advocates for your city. They become part of your team. It's not just we being a reactive. I am the manager, state manager, so I manage the grant writing team, and that's what I expect our grant writers to be, to advocate, not just cheerlead, but basically be like a resident and staff. So we specialize in federal, state, and private foundation grant writing services for the cities and counties and special districts and nonprofits. In this case, it's federal, state. With regards to private foundations, there are opportunities, especially maybe with human services and community services, recreation, where there's smaller grants and arts grants that are suitable and we apply for, and not too many, but we do. Primarily, I would say 80-90% of our focus is on the federal and the state grants. And we just focus on grant writing services. We don't do any lobbying, policy work. That's the job of the municipalities. We follow your lead. We work with you, and we provide its grant writing services and grant management services. And okay, and if we can go on, I don't want to take too long because I do want to get to questions. And so we have a team of over 30 grant writers with 250 combined years of a writing experience. Writing competitive grants. There are some grants that are not as competitive, or formula grants, and we still work on the formula grants and the competitive grants because we do know sometimes staff is the issue of capacity is an issue. So we do come in and work on formula grants and non-competitive grants, and also with the grant management. And we do believe that in terms of our extensive knowledge, it's something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of the fact that we encourage our grant writers not just to work with your staff, but also to work with the agencies, the funders. It's important that our staff develop that relationship or have that relationship with the agency, whether it's Caltrans, the district local assistant engineer, or working with state parks and with the program managers and the directors, that we have that relationship and continue to advocate and ask the questions so we can put ourselves in the best competitive position. So we develop those relationships with state and federal agencies. For instance, this morning, I spent a lot of time with HCD, Housing Community Development, and the Department of Justice out in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the clients. So experts on researching and identifying grants to successfully write grants and do the post-award compliance, the grant management. Sometimes the happiest day is when you get the grant and then you find out that how much grant administration is required. I do want to say, and I probably mentioned it later with regards to grant awards, when we work with our clients, that we fully understand even before we apply, what is it going to take to do the grant administration? For instance, if it's CDBG, maybe there's a CDBG grant, and I don't know, but I'm just using an example, or any grant that requires some extensive grant management administration. We take that into consideration. Do we have the capacity? Is this going to be a little too burdensome, or can we handle it? Can our grant writers do the grant administration? In most cases, certainly they can. But we do look at not just the scoring rubric for the grants, but we also look at, as I mentioned before, the requirements for reporting and administering the grant. Okay, so if we can move on. And this is just simply like, a number of our partners that we work with, and relationships and partnerships are important. Not for just the sake of communication and finding out what's going on, but seeing what's around the corner, what's ahead, gathering knowledge, whether it's at the grassroots, working with your community, understanding and being at community meetings and understanding what's being discussed at the ground level, at the grassroots level, but also what's happening in Sacramento, what's happening in Washington, D.C., what's happening with our regional agencies in terms of funding opportunities. For instance, we do know that working with state parks, that there are going to be some regional agencies that are going to take some cuts, probably because of the situation with the state budget. All this information gathering is very important, and we included in whether it's in our assessment and our selection of grants. And so it's important. Let's continue on. This is simply just an array of the different types of grants that the diversity of grants we have, 70 with regards to Prop 68. Only 10% of grants were awarded, and I think our staff hit like 25% to 30% of the ones that we applied for. And this is just we apply for small grants, but we apply for large grants. I think the key thing is this, not so much the amount of the grant, but the suitability of the grant. Okay, and if we could move from here, okay, to the next. Oh, I guess more grants and the PowerPoint. So again, the diversity of the grants, and if we could move on, and you could, I don't want to spend time too much talking about other cities. So so how it works, and this is what the grant writers assigned to work with our clients, in this case, Menlo Park. We do a needs assessment. The needs assessment helps us get started. What are our priorities? We look at the CIP, we look at your general plan, we look at the elements within your general plan, we look at any economic development strategy, we look at reports, surveys, anything that could give us an input and ideas on what we should prioritize and what is fundable at this point. And I want us, from the needs assessment, it's important to develop a strategy. Maybe for some cities, personally myself, I look at it as 6 months to 12-month strategy, because sometimes the climate changes, sometimes other needs arise in the meantime. For instance, you had a FEMA grant, and I'm working with cities, and suddenly the winter storms, and that changes, and we have to do a U-turn, and suddenly I'm working on FEMA grants to deal with last year's and the year before winter storm recovery, because that becomes a priority. So there's some flexibility, but we do like to work with the strategy that's developed with your staff. And assessment doesn't just begin at the first meeting or the first initial meeting when we work with the city. I like to think that assessment is ongoing, but it's important to have a good starting point and have some targets. What are we looking for? What is needed? For some cities, they really need to, before they get to infrastructure, they need to get to do some planning work. And it's different. It needs to be very much customized. There's not a one size fits all. So we focus on grant research and identification. Our staff, our grant writers also have support from staff assistants that provide research. So we're continually researching and updating the available grants, the grants that are available. As you know, there's many grants that are coming out of the federal government, that come out of the state, and we search kind of the nook and crannies and find sometimes what we call niche grants, unique grants that seem to fit a need. And so we have staff that does research. Our grant writers also are encouraged to do research as well. And we use a number of search engines that we subscribe to. to help us do our work and do the search. But the other thing that's helpful is, again, as I mentioned at the top of this PowerPoint, is the discussion with directors, with program managers at the various agencies, whether they're state or federal or regional, and listening to them and talking to them and getting the information and the information that's shared, so we know what's around the corner, or what's going to appear, what's going to be emphasized, prioritized, and what is not. So that's also part of the research that we come from, just kind of not just simply depending on what you can find on your computer and the internet. It's important to have that dialogue with the funders. So with regards to the writing, creating schedules and timely submission, what we encourage is when we put together a grant that you obviously you have your grant announcement, you start developing the grant, and you focus on the deadline. But it's very important, the process is very important, that we have these internal deadlines so we don't rush to the end of the grant. Okay, and those deadlines are internal deadlines, are deadlines that we agreed upon with staff. Okay, so I know you're busy. I used to work for the city of Los Angeles, and I know how challenging it is. You come in the day you have your top 10 priorities, and if you get to number 3, you probably had a good day. So I understand that. So we want to be an asset. And part of that is the coordination and the communication and the agreement to deliverables. And the internal deadlines to me are incredibly important. They keep us on task. They keep us focused, and it's an agreement between the grant writer and staff. And during that discussion, sometimes we learn a lot from each other, and we make some really good decisions. But it's important that we just not focus exclusively on the deadline, that we focus on how we're going to get there. What are the materials? What is the data that we need? Sometimes we need quantitative data. Sometimes we need qualitative data. Most times we need both. What is the resource? Is it up to date? The great thing now is that we have so many tools to obtain data for different reasons and to support or justify the need for a specific grant. So, but it's also important to have the information, the data that's obtained by the city itself, that it has. And so we use that. That's kind of like original source. And then, as I mentioned before, the grant administration. We don't administer all grants, but if that's asked for by Menlo Park, then we'll administer the grant. And I want to say that, I am saying it, that we have our grant writer as the POC, as the point of contact for you. So you only have one point of contact, but there's going to be months where there's multiple grants and we have to think about bandwidth. And so we'll bring in another writer or another staff member to provide assistance and support as well. So it's not just one person. Okay, whatever your need is, maybe we need to bring in a couple people to help on a grant, or if it's especially a large grant. So, and we can determine what the tasks are and what the responsibilities are. But I want to let you know that it's important that there is capacity on our side, as much as we are focused on making sure that you have capacity on your side, and we provide that support. Okay, if we can continue on. So it's bi-weekly, but sometimes it gets weekly, or sometimes every 3 weeks as needed, not to be redundant, but we do provide, you probably get email blast if you're a member of the city. Brittany probably gets it. But we also, it's incumbent upon our grant writers to provide, to update you on what are the opportunities. These opportunities are based on the assessment. We could bring in other opportunities for discussion, but we don't want to bombard you with, here's 40 grants, please read them and get back to me tomorrow. That's not how it works. but we do like to provide you appropriate updates on grants that may be coming up. Maybe they'll be coming up in 3 or 4 months, because sometimes we need to have 3 or 4 months to prepare for a grant. Our expectations and excellence. So we do monitor, and we have staff that monitors the agencies. When is a grant going to be announced, or when is the grant awards going to be announced? So we do that. We provide the monthly reports. The monthly reports, we have a template for that, but we don't always have to stick to the template. For some clients, they prefer Excel spreadsheets. Some just, want something much more descriptive or different. Whatever works for Menlo Park is what we're doing. And if we need to change it or augment it in a way that's suitable, that makes it appropriate, how would I say, appropriate for the staff with a preference for the city, then we do that. Okay, but the important thing is knowing a couple things is what are the grants that have been awarded, what are the grants that are in progress, and what are the prospective grants that we're targeting in what areas, and when are they being released, so we can be prepared. And that's all. Much of that discussion is taken care of in monthly grant managed meetings. What we do is usually there's a set date, and sometimes the date has to be changed for certain circumstance, but we basically have regular monthly meetings. In between those meetings, for instance, what happens is that in most cases that sometimes we have, like for me, I have monthly meetings, but there are times when I need to have a weekly meeting, say with Public Works, because we got a number of projects coming up. So we'll just schedule weekly meetings. So I'm just letting the commission know that we talk once a month. That's not the way it goes. Okay, we talk as much as needed and meet as needed. We don't need to, and I don't want to stress as needed, because sometimes, this is just me, sometimes there's too many meetings. We want to be efficient with your time. Okay, we can move on. I should have titled this a little better. I apologize, but there was questions with regards to the Inflation Reduction Act that was released by the White House, and some discussions on that, and the grants that are being released under the IRA, under the Inflation Reduction Act. There's 2 areas, and one is the EV Acceleration Challenge, and there's number of grants that are coming out on the state. And the good thing is, what I'm seeing is many of the grants in terms of with many of the EV acceleration type of grants, kind of ramping up with EV, whether it's charging stations, infrastructure, or vehicles, providing incentives. I see coming from the Department of Energy an alignment with what California is doing. And it seems like in California, we're a little bit ahead of the curve. That's just my opinion. But so these grants will be, there's a number of grants under these 4 categories, which is the tools and resources, consumer education and support, EV fleet expansion, and community charging. There is an emphasis on providing grants to disadvantaged communities, but that's not exclusive, because the goal is to regardless if you're a disadvantaged community, cited as disadvantaged community or not, that we reach that from the White House and from the Department of Energy, that we hit this goal that 50% of all new vehicles sales be electric, that we move to in light of climate change, that we move quickly and efficiently. So there's a lot of push for this, and we'll be looking forward to working with Menlo Park in any way with regards to EV acceleration as needed. It's different level at all cities. If we can move on to the next. And just the Inflation Reduction Act. So there'll be tax provisions that will save families money on their energy bills and accelerate clean energy, clean vehicles, clean buildings, and clean manufacturing. Many of the clean energy tax provisions offer bonus credits to projects that are located in low income and energy communities, as I mentioned, but not exclusively, as we're finding out. Also there's I want to mention, I didn't put it in here, but also with broadband connectivity. With regards to the tax provisions, they're numerous, they're extensive. I put together, it was so extensive, I just put together the hyperlink on there, or the link on there. So we can research, but what we can do in this case is kind of drill down and see what opportunities are most appropriate for Menlo and suitable for Menlo Park. Okay, and if we can move on. I guess that's it right now, but I hope I may not have covered everything, but I hope I covered sufficient. But anyways, I'm more than open to questions.
Well, I'll start with one. So may I assume that these came in before the hiring of the firm? Is
That's
that
correct.
okay? So I'm curious about, so all this sounds very helpful, what you described, and I appreciate your presentation. May I ask, what is the scope of, because I imagine this could take a lot of time. What is the scope of your initial contract and initial deliverables? I mean, what could be obtained for that initial? I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, what we could get for the initial and, you know, so forth, just some ideas.
I can start with that, and David, you can add more
Mhm.
information. So the city manager's office is the department that's spearheading the partnership with California Consulting Inc. and helping to coordinate their work citywide with all of the departments. So the partnership really began with a group meeting with all of the department heads and the consultant to kind of understand their process and what our role would be. And then really they were put on task to start researching those opportunities and then seeing what would potentially be suitable for us. And it went the other way too. So each department said, hey, you know, this is something that we're looking at. Can you see if there are any grant opportunities that meet that? And so really our goal was to bring them on board as these subject matter experts in a lot of different areas who have, you know, written, you know, safe routes to school grants, probably hundreds of them at this point, and to really help us be successful in whatever opportunities it is that we were seeking. So it's that partnership for grant writing overall and for that grant searching. And
Yeah, I didn't ask my question as specifically. I guess it was the initial dollar amount of the contract. I'm curious what it would be.
Yeah. You know, I actually don't work on the contract side, on that business development side. My focus in the firm is managing the grant writing team and ensuring the effectiveness of the grant writing team. That's the deliverables I want them is to write grants and deliver grants and succeed with them writing grants. In terms of the cost, I actually personally don't have that. I actually kind of create a firewall, so because I've just got to focus on production. But I don't know, Brittany or the city may have that information on the cost of the services. I actually don't have that information.
I don't have that available for you today. We can certainly get that to you.
Yeah, I don't want to throw out a number on that because I don't personally get involved in the negotiation with the contract and all that. But I do want to say that in terms of the number of grants, it's not usually a specific, it's really everything that we can be competitive at. And as I mentioned earlier, it could be there's months where there's not much, and then there's months where, okay, we got 3 or 4 grants that we really got to start writing and do that. Because for instance, I could safely say in during the fall and the winter, there's not much opportunity for police grants. But then come spring and summer, there's numerous, and for some reason, the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Administration released a number of grants, public safety grants in that time. So we gear up for that. And I can tell you, if we're going to produce public safety grants, it's going to be in that period. And so there's a level of predictability and a little bit unpredictability. But the key thing, as I mentioned before, is setting your targets. What are we going to go after? What are we going to fund? And meeting those goals. In terms of the cost, I'll be honestly preoccupied myself. I care about the production and the relationship between the writers and the city. I stay in my lane.
Can I ask kind of a follow-up question? So is it safe to understand then that, and I've written grants, so I know there's a lot of work that goes into identifying the right grant, and there's huge amounts. So congratulations to the city on that, what you've already accomplished. But so is it then the way this works that there is kind of now this baseline service of you guys are now helping the city identify appropriate opportunities, and then when the decision is made to act on any one of those opportunities, then there's like time and materials of completing that grant? Or is it just one, it's like a flat fee that whatever happens during the length of the contract?
I wouldn't want to guess and provide the commission with inaccurate information. So I'm happy to research that and share that information with the commission after. I wouldn't want to misspeak.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think sort of the members are interested in understanding the contraction terms, how much it is it contingent on anything, and kind of the time of service and kind of the scope of service.
Yeah. Okay.
Lynn, I think you had been.
Well, but you were going to speak, so please. This actually is maybe more of a question for the staff, given how you outlined your role. It's not, you said not policy, but I was curious, and your reports, I think, would be useful. I mean, I would be curious to know more about that. It is one of the subcommittee's role to, new sources of revenue is a role, so I'm quite interested. But maybe later for the city, what would be your thought about what kind of grant policies might be needed? Internal controls reporting, as part of that. And that sounds like a subsequent topic. I'm just curious about that. What you said sounded very good. I mean, I like the idea it's focused on priorities, but what infrastructure would be in place? Or what are your thoughts about that at a future point? I don't think that's a question for you as you outlined your work, but I'm curious about that for later. So, yeah.
The infrastructure on our side.
No, I don't think I'm asking it quite the right way, but
Okay,
like
okay.
grant policy, grant writing policies, reporting, internal controls. What
Yeah.
might we see, but it sounds like you don't make recommendations there, if I understood you correctly, or am I
Yeah,
wrong?
well, we do make recommendations. We do make recommendations, and it's a really good question. It's actually a really good question because, again, not all cities are the same. Yes, there's fundamental components of all cities, but priorities are different. Leadership is different. Coordination. I like working with cities because, like I said, that's my background. I worked in the city of Los Angeles doing community economic development. And so and many of our staff have also. So it's important that we set a kind of a system, okay? The relationship with the city should be systemic. That's why I mentioned the importance of the monthly reports, the type of reports, the assessment, and having a strategy, having internal deadlines. Okay, that we have a list of the grant opportunities or the areas and the issues that we're researching to find the grants that respond to that. We want to look around ahead of the corner. Sometimes it's very difficult because things move very fast, and sometimes there's changes because of budget issues or some others, or like I mentioned before, suddenly 1 month I'm here and then the next month I'm dealing with a bunch of FEMA grants because of the winter storms and stuff, and so it's important that there is a, how would I say, I maybe the term for me is just kind of like a system, but maybe it becomes an infrastructure where you're at the level where trying to use a non-political term, but almost like a rhythm, how we work with the city and how we operate. So there is a process. I think process is important because, and the system is important because that way we can be very much more diagnostic and actually be more accountable and get away from kind of an ad hoc. Can you look at this? Can you look at this? Can you look at that? And that way it can be communicated more effectively to the commission, to the city manager, and to staff where we're at. Okay. So so process is really important. And again, there's not a one size fits all. I work with counties, I work with cities, so it becomes different. And I want to also emphasize that, and something I didn't mention, is that a dynamic that's been emerging for us, and we responded to it, is in the last 3 or 4 years, we're working more. I work a lot with engineering consultants. I work a lot with nonprofits because these nonprofits are also partners with the city for certain programs, especially in community services and human services. Homeless services, the continuum of care. So I'll work with the staff at the continuum of care. I'll work with, you're in San Mateo, so you got the San Mateo CTA. So we'll work with regional agencies and coordinate that because there are grants that come through the region, regionally. Sometimes there's a set aside, especially with Caltrans grants. There's a portion that is competitive. There's a portion that's formula, the portion that comes through the MPOs. So that all is integrated. I work with a lot of, like I said, engineering consultants because I'll write it, but the consultants have a lot of the information and the data. So that coordination, and what we'll eventually see is that we set into a nice kind of, what I like to think, a nice kind of system, almost like a pattern. So there has to be, I always, in order to have efficiency, you have to have a little bit of predictability, but we also have the flexibility to move. Like I said, when there's a disaster, suddenly we're FEMA, suddenly there's a budget crisis. So I'm going to focus more on federal grants and less on the state grants because they may be delayed for a while. So I don't know, in a long-winded way, I helped your answer, but I do agree that there is an infrastructure that's for the lack of a better term, that's created. I just don't have the contract in numbers for you.
Absolutely, and if I may, Chair, to add a little bit, so the city does track our grants very closely. We really have to. I think as part of what our consultant was saying, we receive these grant funds. First, we have to go to the council on many of them to say, hey, can we apply for this grant? Can we receive these grant funds if there's that local match? So there's some transparency there. When we receive the funds, they're often going in to, they're tracked by project within our funds, and what's going in and what's going out as part of the reporting on a quarterly and an annual basis. What milestones we've met, what work has been done to complete the grant. That's all being reported to the reporting agent or the granting agency. And we are always subject to audits from those granting agencies. You know, I've been a part of a Caltrans audit, and they are looking at every receipt and every document related to how those funds are being spent. And so that is really built into grants to have a close eye on that, because they want to make sure that the money that they're providing is going to where it needs to go and accomplishing that greater aim of the grant itself. We also, on an annual basis, have to take the single audit report to council that talks about some of our grant funding. Maybe our senior accountant, Ming, could talk a little bit about that.
So once we have the federal grants expenditure over 750,000, we will have the single audit report every, by the end of the, April and every year. So when we have the, audit, during audit, they will look at the single audit part as well. Once the effort is generated, they use this audited number to prepare the single audit. So, recent 2 years, we have APA, funds, grant, from the federal, so every year is more than that amount, so we report that every year.
Who sees the reports? Are these internal reports or to the council or just to the firm doing the audit? I mean, who gets these reports?
The single audit, sure.
Yeah, because we got, so each of the single audit reports are actually filed with the federal government.
Okay,
Because it's a federal government requirement that we get audited, so there is a called clearinghouse, federal clearinghouse, and that the report is filed with the federal clearinghouse that lists that. Because all the federal agencies go out to the clearinghouse and find, you know, if they're awarding it to us, they want to go out and see what our single audit said and what we had for that particular year, so we go out and prepare that.
And I believe that report also gives the debts of this commission, I recall.
okay.
I don't know on that, sorry. I can't speak to that. Three. Cover that tomorrow. We'll figure it out. Exactly.
Yes, so each year, the Finance and Audit Commission has the opportunity to first review the annual comprehensive financial report, and then the single audit report will be brought to a meeting after that.
Nothing happens over the summer.
The annual comprehensive should be
That's
soon. Yeah.
Okay.
It goes on to council.
I have one more question if anyone else does. That would be, what might the role of the FAC be in this? You know, especially given one of our subcommittee topics is focus on new sources of revenue.
Certainly. So I believe when the commission was talking about this item before, there were some creative ideas that were being brainstormed, and that the commission was or the subcommittee was gonna explore if those may be viable or maybe something they wanted to recommend.
No, I meant in the grant specifically. If, do you see any role for the FAC in that? If so, what might it be?
I think if the commissioners were to come across a particularly compelling grant opportunity that you may have come across yourselves, or you might read about an agency that's received it, maybe a neighboring city that's that you want to make sure that we're aware of, that more eyes would definitely be helpful in accomplishing the many things that we need to here at the city. In terms of, preparing the grant applications, that would be done by the subject matter experts that we have on staff and with the assistance of our consultant.
Commissioner Day?
Thanks for asking that question, because that was on my mind, and I do have a follow-up. Give some clarity on sort of the role of the FSC. From your perspective, David, do you see sort of, are there still sort of sufficient opportunities in Inflation Reduction Act that you recommend that we sort of look at sort of what's available as an sort of area of research? Or are
Yeah.
there other? Go ahead, yeah, I'll stop there and wait to answer
Oh,
that.
no, okay. Well, I think there are opportunities in looking at the enhancement of, right now, there's great emphasis on broadband infrastructure. That may not be, it depends on what the priorities are, but with regards to enhancing the EV infrastructure, especially benefiting the entire state. I think that's ongoing for most cities throughout, because that connectivity with broadband, the connectivity with regards to EV charging station, making sure that what we're seeing is it's putting the infrastructure is one thing, and installing the infrastructure level 1 to level 2 and is necessary. But what we're also seeing is the need for the maintenance and maintaining that infrastructure. That is a really important thing. And then we're also looking at the opportunities with regards to fleet vehicles and the infrastructure for fleet vehicles, and looking at the larger vehicles that we have. Okay, we can take our sedans and such, and our Ford F-150s. But what about the F-250s? What about the larger vehicles that many public works departments use? So that's where a lot of the need is across the board. Okay, across the board. And those opportunities will be at the state, but then also at the federal level. So that's something we have to look at. And then looking at the emphasis through the Infrastructure Act with regards to smart technology with regards to highway. And when we talk about highway and we talk about roads, again, it's connectivity. Is it, Menlo Park is not isolated. You're in an area near colleges, universities, schools, cities, and looking at smart technology to address issue of congestion, to improve public safety, traffic safety from a regional, participate in the regional effort as well and benefit from that. There may be some opportunities where the regional agency or through, maybe working with other neighboring cities will be more competitive to improve some of the smart technology that we're looking at for our highways and for our roads to improve traffic safety. So those are kind of the opportunities. So I could see where the participation is regional in scope, and also participation where it's very local with regards to, for instance, your fleet vehicles, and more so than your fleet vehicles, your heavy duty vehicles as well. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge also that's facing, the Department of Energy, because the cost, and the technology for this. And also, as I mentioned before, not just having the charging infrastructure, but also the issue of the maintenance issue as well, because there's a cost to that. It's almost like a gift. Yeah, I got a EV charging station. Now I got to maintain it and making sure that it doesn't break down.
Go ahead.
Is it okay
That
to
helps.
ask one or two more questions? So maybe we follow up with another couple of questions. First, are there sort of any other advice you have in terms of, large sort of grant writing opportunities that there may be, present? You've mentioned in the PowerPoint EV acceleration challenge and inflation reduction back. Are there any others that that's top of mind for you to recommend specifically?
Yeah, those are the larger grants, and the Department of Transportation also has outside of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's been a great push, as you know, in funding for enhanced infrastructure across the country. So we look at the Department of Transportation. I think I mentioned the issue of mobility, and those are where the larger grants in a city like Menlo Park can look at. If you're on the coast, my answer would be different. If you're in a desert community, my answers would be different. But looking at where you're at, those are looking at. And then we could also look at, you know, economic development and job creation with the EDA and keeping an eye on that. And I know that there's what I'm seeing when emerging with the EDA and the Commerce Department is some more unique programs. So we're keeping an eye on that. It used to be the traditional programs were there and every year after year, but there's some newer programs coming up aboard, and so we can look at that. But for the most part, in terms of the larger ones, it's Department of Energy, Transportation Department, and agencies working under there to deal with broadband infrastructure. Those are where a lot of the investments are coming at. And of course, in the state of California, it's housing, and I know you're dealing with that with your planning and housing and the push for housing production and that's policy as well. And so we work on that. Those aren't terribly large grants, but they can be. And what we're going to see on the other side of the converse right now, I think our challenge is looking at more funding for open space and green space and recreational facility. The other thing, because of the state budget, but in the area of sustainability, that funding is just going to continue, I think, to grow incrementally. I don't know at what rate, but I can't see that abating.
So Chair, I'm not sure of the process of, perhaps you can guide us, but I love the idea of sort of doing, finding opportunities in the area of Inflation Reduction Act around, sustainability, fleet charging, et cetera. I believe that there are other peer commissions that may already be spearheading that. So maybe that's already in place and we just sort of say we support that. If not, I'd love to see if there's sort of more research we can do in that area. The other area that resonated with me is, based on David's comments, is the sort of the Economic Development Act related opportunities, again, coming from Bellhaven district. That's always something that I think would be a beneficial area to look at for that community.
I mean, this topic definitely seems to be of interest to the commission. So maybe one thing we can do is in 6 months have CA Consulting come back and maybe provide an update on kind of where things are on the grants and kind of any opportunities they've looked at. And, to the extent we see anything in terms of opportunities, we can also share. Would that be something we'd like to do, or?
It seems like a good suggestion because it does touch on perhaps a couple of the different subcommittee types of projects that we're doing. We'll touch on the one that Susan and I are doing. We'll certainly touch on the one that is Susan and Lynn and Jeff are doing. Which reminds me to take just a little avenue, a quick detour. One thing that we did not do is add the opportunity for the people who are absent during the time that we assign the subcommittees the chance to join. So we didn't agendize that, which is my mistake, but I want to bookmark it as something that needs to be done. And now return to the topic.
Yeah, we can definitely put that on next meeting's agenda, along with the frequency of our meetings, which I know, Lynn, is something you also wanted to.
I'd like to build on the comment. I mean, open space. I'm very interested in that, open space, green space, parks, and maybe our Environmental Quality Commission or the Parks and Rec Commission might be too. So it'd be great to have the firm back, but I also think it would be nice to have kind of more, I don't want to call it a working meeting, but kind of more interactive to talk about, maybe the structure and then how we might be of help. So I know you've already told us, through research, but it just seems like maybe there is something more, but I'm interested in open space. And parks.
Yeah, I'd love to participate. Again, this is something that we can coordinate with staff and, where I know this sounds kind of corny, but we're kind of at your behest. And we'd love to, you know, this is our area of expertise, and if we can contribute, and it could be coordinated with the leadership in the city and the staff, and you're the part of the leadership and have that discussion. You know, and focus on some areas. Yeah, that would be fine, and especially, you know, and then particularly for me, the issue of open space and conservation and green space is something that I'm particularly part of my focus outside of my work. So, however that can be facilitated and coordinated, we'll cooperate and work with staff on that. Again,
Yeah.
as I mentioned before, we're at your behest, and it probably fits in within our scope of services. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about which subcommittee this would fall most neatly under, and it would probably be the alternative sources of revenue. Maybe if, you know, as a subcommittee, you guys can think through how it would be best to coordinate with California Consulting, what topic areas, frequency, and then we could liaise with staff and kind of go ahead and see if they could be more active in the subcommittee meetings. Okay, Commissioner Day.
Structurally, is there an opportunity, again, sort of with, I'm sure the Parks and Recs Commission or the Environmental Quality Commission are, you know, are naturally sort of also maybe thinking about some of these areas. So structurally, is there any opportunity to create some sort of a cross-commission working group or, you know, cross-commission subcommittee?
I think this is more a question for city staff. I don't know how those commissions work and whether they have subcommittees that may be interested in
The
them.
related question would be, is there anything that we are authorized to do that is not at the behest of city council?
I will have to ask our city clerk's office, who's our Brown Act expert, on how it might look to have a commission working with another commission. I think each commission does have its own focus, and so whereas this committee might be, it is focused via this subcommittee on the funding aspect of it. You know, Environmental Quality Commission might have a different focus.
Yeah.
So I do think there's distinct purposes for each of the commissions, but I will certainly request that clarification information on what that could look like, if it could, or the answer might be no, and just to be transparent.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I'm sort of trying to understand is how to actuate,
Yes.
you know, and sort of actionable next steps. You know, it sort of, in going back to your question about sort of our charter in sort of in this regard, is it sort of guidance, suggestions, or perhaps, you know, just listen and have the, you know, have a California Consulting come back 6 months and say, hey, what progress has been made? So are we sort of more listeners and if not, you know, what would an actionable step out of the subcommittee be? We recommend that these grants be looked at, and then the city go look at it, or maybe come back and say, you know what, so this actually has also been recommended, or, you know, has come under from advice from EQC or Parks and Rec, or, you know, some other.
Well, the city council asked us to look at alternative funding sources. I mean, we've been directly requested
I
to
see.
do that.
That's
I see. Do you think within that we have a lot of,
I think we're supposed to come back with
a lot
recommendations,
of leeway?
not me, but
But
somebody.
yeah, no, sure.
Specific recommendations,
Yes.
which could be literally, I'm making it up, it might be walk and chew gum, but it also might be work with CA Consulting to generate 500, in cooperation with environmental.
I
Like,
see.
we can recommend anything we want.
Okay, no, that's actually good guidance.
But
Thank
I
you.
think city council are the ones who say,
Who would then actuate that based on the
I
recommendations?
believe so.
Got it.
Could be wrong.
Okay,
Because it's also following on this, so if or consulting is, their job is to kind of do the research and identify what opportunities are out there that Menlo Park as a city might be interested in. And so, yeah, it could be EQ would be one interested in one. So then if, I don't know who the consulting group funnels into staff, so apologies, I miss it, I don't remember. But so then, who then prioritizes, say like, oh yeah, there's 6 different opportunities, but there's limited resources, so then who decides which grant gets applied for and how, would it be on, which money, which is the largest pot of money, which is the biggest need, and who would address?
What are the deadlines for grant application, to commit to, so that we can make a decision in a timely manner?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, there's.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
would affect the prioritization of those opportunities, because there's probably, I mean, I'm kind of faced with this right now, there's too many opportunities and the deadlines are too close and you have to pick.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what our wonderful staff does, and we merely recommend and council directs. But that could be wrong.
Right. So, but the kind of like, we need to, who collates and if it's, if we every 6 months go like, great, cool, that sounds like you identified good grants, glad to hear those proposals went in, we'll cheer when they get funded, but who, I don't know who it is that feeds into, and then how would the input from the various commissions, if they have input, to these different opportunities that could be funded, how does that get floated up from the various committees through consulting agency, through staff to the city council to make a decision?
I think, sorry, I
No, go
think I
ahead.
do want to let maybe Brittany step in and maybe talk about the prioritization process, because it sounds like, this is something that the staff will do analysis on and then go and recommend to the city council, and then the city council will be like, this is great prioritization. No, we want to do something else. We don't want you to go forward with that grant. But maybe if you could describe a little bit about the process, that may help.
Yes, Chair, happy to do so. So, each department, has the staff liaison that works with California Consulting. But prior to that, they would look at those grant opportunities, that they know. For instance, there's always a Safe Routes to School grant cycle going on, that helps make pedestrian bicycle improvements to help kids get to and from school. That's something that we know as experts in public works to look out for. And we create, or we identify projects that, would be eligible or appropriate for that type of funding. And we wait for the cycle and we apply and get some, and then we have to administer that grant. And so that's really an example of what we have to do in each of our departments based on our subject matter expertise, with the staff from the different divisions working with the department head. And then, of course, working with our city manager's office. So city manager is the CEO. He oversees what we do within the departments. And so that's really a collaborative effort. Absolutely, we can't apply for everything. And so there is that push and pull of, okay, what do we think we might be the most successful at? What project is shelf ready? And we know that, many agencies want to fund something that's really concrete and they know you'll be successful, versus, you still need to have, for instance, a streets master plan conducted before we want to give you this street funding, because we don't know if this is where you need it the most in your city. For example, there's a lot of back end legwork that has to happen before you're ready to apply. So it's really an ongoing effort in each of our operations to identify and apply for those grants. So not all of them have to go to city council. That's really a grant by grant basis. Public works grants do have the most restrictions that go with them, and generally speaking, prevailing wage, for example. And so often those are the ones you'll see go to council.
Well, I'd like to kind of add some details. So we represent the community. I mean, we all live in Menlo Park. I think that's checked out. And so we may know about things that aren't, maybe on the radar screen that people want. So I guess what I'm wondering about, I think it's always better to get multiple points of data or people and perspectives giving input. And that Safe Routes for School, well, I know that is, particular council members have particular interest there, but what about other areas that, there's an interest, but maybe it's not on someone's radar screen. So I guess that's really what I'm curious about, and I think that, because I know from years past related to this, the capital improvement projects, it seemed kind of like an ad hoc. The process seemed kind of backroom and a little informal, and I don't mean to imply there was anything particularly wrong with that, but it was kind of, a group of staff and, were the perspectives included. So I guess that's really what I'm kind of curious about, and if that part could be, built in, it just seems that would be good.
If I may, Chair, just to add to that, I think really stepping back at a high level for one of the driving purposes of this commission is transparency, right? Dollars are confusing, the budget is confusing, the ACFR is confusing if you don't have that expertise. And so this commission is another resource, another opportunity for members of the public to be understanding what's going on, because the questions that the commission has are likely the questions that individuals would have. How do we know that the city isn't misspending grant dollars? That's a great question. I think we talked a little bit about the auditing process and tracking process for that today. That's what I see. The driving force of this commission is that transparency. The questions that you have are important. You're more eyes and ears, and it's our job to present that information to you and to the community.
Yeah, that was a very informative discussion. I really second what you mentioned about sort of, if the city has really requested, given that the city has already requested to sort of recommend additional sorts of revenue, I think it'd be wonderful for us to go and recommend in certain directions where for grant writing.
Yeah, and we can certainly recommend to city council, a special task force that joins several commission groups together to look into grants that we might be interested in. And then, of course, it'll be up to city council to decide whether that's a path they want to take forward, but that could certainly be our recommendation if we think that's a good path.
I given that I sort of suggested that as I'm sort of retrospecting, given the fact that there are several deadlines and, sort of, a lot of the projects may or may not get funding, based on, like the upcoming election coming up. I think that, perhaps there's some sense of urgency, and if the Inflation Reduction Act is something we want to leverage, perhaps we want to sort of be more directive and say, let's go look at these areas, because creating a task force, et cetera, has its natural entropy and inertia and time, which may be scarce in an election year. Time.
Madam Chair, and maybe you were mentioning bringing the consultant back, in the future to share a little bit. It might be something that we add to, frequent meetings. What are the grants since we last met that we've applied for or received? And granted, that's really a long-term perspective. As the consultant was saying, grants come in cycles, they come in waves. You might apply for a grant and you'll hear back in 4, 5, 6 months whether you received it or not. So that's, a long-term horizon, but that could add to the transparency and maybe help accomplish some of the goals that you're speaking about.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely include this in our quarterly regular meetings, if that's, a good frequency in terms of cadence. I wouldn't recommend anything more frequent, just because it does take time for them to go and write the grants and collect all the information, but we can certainly do quarterly instead of 6 months.
Refresh my memory, what is the size of the Menlo Park budget, the annual budget? It's like 100 million, 80 million, 80 million? 89. 89.
Last time.
Okay.
Are you referring to the general fund or?
I'm talking to, so when the budget comes across our desks, there's a total amount of spending the city does that's projected for 2024, or looking back that we did in 2023. And I remembered that a number in the range of what Jeff said. Is it correct that in the course of a year, we spend about 80 million?
I think that our expenditures were 75, but they might have been 79.
But I'm asking because I'm looking at this number, 84 million in total grant awards. Obviously, that's an award which might be paid out over some. So it does seem to be nevertheless likely to be a significant chunk of our annual spending. And I raise this question because at first glance, I thought, you know what, this is going to be a very small amount of our spending, and it is a naturally very transparent process because the grant funders require it. So I was wondering whether or not we actually did want to revisit it because our time can be limited. But now it actually appears that it is a significant chunk of our spending. And so therefore, I withdraw my objection. I think it's a very good idea for us to look at it every quarter.
And Commissioner, if I may, help clarify. So most of the budget presentations and what we focus on as staff with the city council is how the city council wants to direct us to spend the general fund. The general fund is the largest fund of the city, and it is spent at the discretion of our city council. These grant funds are an additional fund, so they're tracked separately. So they're not part of that $79 million.
Okay.
They're separate because they do span multiple fiscal years. They are for that specific purpose. And so those are in restricted funds, which are tracked separately.
And I appreciate you clarifying that. My point was a whole lot less sophisticated, which was they're non-trivial.
Right.
My first instinct, oh, hang on, this might be trivial in the big picture. No, they're actually non-trivial in the big picture. And so paying attention to it
Yeah,
is a good idea.
significant. Yeah, it adds significant value.
I would love more detail too, at a future point as to what, I know about the brick grant. I know that's 50 million roughly and what they're doing for that. But these other grants, I'd be curious at some future point as to what they're for.
So I second or third that quarterly reviews of the grant.
So I guess kind of our takeaways are we'll talk about this quarterly and get an update. And then also the alternative revenues subcommittee will get together and, come up with a proposal on how we and other commissions want to get more involved in the grant process.
Okay.
You're right. There's a one. Sorry.
Fun. I like to know how much people are.
I'm gonna put a number that it's hard to track.
There's so many of them knocking around. The right one.
So I guess we can thank the California consulting team for joining us this evening. Thanks for a very informative session.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad
Thank
to
you.
follow up as needed, so we're here.
We'll
Thank you.
see you in a quarter.
Yeah, I'll see you in a quarter with staff. Bye.
I think it's okay to.
We're okay.
He'll let us know.
We'll move on to regular business. Under regular business, the Finance and Audit Commission considers recommendations from the city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require the commission's approval. Our first regular business item is to accept the minutes from the October 19th, 2023 meeting, which has been attached with the agenda. Can I have management analyst Adrian Quintino introduce the item?
Certainly. So in the agenda packet attached as item E1 are the minutes from our October 19th, 2023 regular meeting. And we're going to have them on the screen here.
Do we have any clarifying questions before taking this to public comment?
Well, I don't have a question, but Suzanne introduced one that was, yeah, we did talk about adding more subcommittee members and even the frequency of our meetings. And then I'm curious, what is the process for requesting agenda topics? And then when our work plan might be due. So I don't know when we bring up those items.
Those questions might fit the agenda under the commissioner comment section and.
Okay, at the end of the topic, because I saw just one listed. But, okay, so that's kind of like an open commissioner reports.
I think
Okay.
that would be appropriate as the chair.
Okay, great. Okay.
So maybe we can, Adrian, do we have any public comments?
For members of the public who would like to comment on agenda item E1, accept the Finance and Audit Commission minutes for October 19th, 2023. If you are logged in remotely, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or from a landline, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. I am seeing no request for public comment at this time. You may continue.
So maybe we can open it for Finance and Audit Commission discussion.
The discussion was that we have Commissioners Normanton Day and one who have not been assigned or chosen a spot on a subcommittee. And so therefore it's an open.
Gotcha. Should we add that to the agenda for the next meeting, since this section is only approval of these specific minutes?
Yeah, so the item before you, or before the commission, is to review and approve the minutes. If there's a desire to make a comment or suggest an edit to the minutes, that is what is appropriate for this item under your consideration.
Any edits or?
So would somebody volunteering from one of the subcommittees constitute an edit, or is that?
I think that would be a separate agenda. Since we weren't there.
Yeah, I thought I'd try.
Go back in time. Yeah, okay, with that, Adrian, could you please state the motion?
Motion to accept the Finance and Audit Commission minutes for October 19th, 2023.
Do I have a motion and a second for the motion?
I'll move.
Okay. Great, maybe we can take it to a vote. Favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Okay, so that concludes the approval of the minutes. Our next regular business item is review of the September 30th, 2023 investment reports and recommend receipt by city. To introduce the item, can I have Adrian, Management Analyst Adrian Patino, introduce the item?
Certainly. So before you today, we'll have two investment reports. The first will be this one, which is for the quarter ended September 30th, 2023. I'll touch on this one a little more lightly and go a little bit more in depth into the report as of December 31st, since that's our most recent, has our most kind of up-to-date look on the city's portfolio, as well as the most kind of recent economic data within that. So as of September 30th, 2023, the city's fair value portfolio was about 189.425 million. This is about 5.8 million less than the amortized cost. It is important to note that unrealized gains or losses are just that. They are not an actual transaction. And so the city is not incurring an actual cash loss, since the city generally holds its investments to maturity. Through this quarter, the yield of the weighted average of the city's portfolio was 2.86%. The ESG scores, which are the environmental social governance scores provided by the city's advisor Insight, was unchanged at 3.0, which is in line with the average score, which is 3. The weighted duration of the city's portfolio was average maturity being 1.93 years. And with that, I return it to Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Any clarifying questions for city staff on what was presented?
Well, it's me again. So I'm curious about, so under policy, it said the city and the successor agency funds. And I ask, where might we find more information about that in terms of what is that particular fund balance? I didn't see that here. And then as I understand it, it is related to the prior redevelopment agency debt. So I don't know much beyond that, but I'm curious how that works. And I have to say, I'm also interested, I will go to the Menlo Park Fire Finance Committee meetings too, just because I want to, be more informed. And they had a paragraph about that in one of their recent reports, and money coming in, kind of a revenue stream. So to me, it's just kind of a mystery. So just asking about this report here. I'd love to see a little paragraph with more detail like I saw in the finance one, but where might I find more about this? Just in this report or elsewhere at the website?
Absolutely. I that would probably be best with the county where it helps with our recognized obligation payment schedule.
Yeah, that's right. They oversee the operations of the successor agency, which is winding down the operations of the what was previously the Menlo Park Redevelopment Agency. There's also more information in the city's ACFR. So for prior years and the ACFR that we will be bringing to the commission very shortly, there'll be a lot more information regarding the successor agency, how much debt is still left outstanding, things of that nature.
So this is kind of a funny coincidence. One of the things that the city council asked us to do was to look into ways of paying down the debt for the successor agency. And that's what Susan and I have been doing. And in fact, the clarifying question that we had was why they had asked us this question, because there are only 4 more years on that debt. And it is about $4 million a year. And it's specifically the loans were collateralized by a promise of paying them with the tax incremental that was caused by the fact that we built a park in Bellhaven or built the community center in Bellhaven. And I'm only saying all of this because it's a chunk and it looks big when in point of fact is almost no longer extant, and also kind of already defined in a way that puts it kind of out of our hands. It's this is my judgment. And so therefore, if our reports are talking about the successor agency being part of this and that, I would say, look elsewhere for meaningful numbers. It's just, it's $4 million a year for the next 4 years that we promised sometime in the 1980s. And then the state tried to. There's a sequence of political maneuvers that happens outside of our range of power that comes to mean that we have this thing that we have to pay, and it's kind of there.
I do know, have
Oh,
a general
sorry.
idea of the history of all that, because actually I do. But to me, it implies that there's funds, so that's money that's being invested, and then we also have the debt. So when I think of funds, like our own investments at home, to me, funds are something, money you have, whereas a debt is what you owe. So I'm just kind of curious about this. And the fire district's report, to be more specific, they talked about, in fact, I have it right here, the money, that's a source of revenue to them. They get a high percentage of the property, they get a high percentage of the $1 property tax. But they talked about that stream, they said it's you can't predict it, but they expect it to be up they call it the RFTTF, Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund distribution, as up maybe potentially 16.3%. So I'm also curious later what might happen to our financial picture once. Yeah, it just seems like a lot of questions. You have the funds, you have the debt, you have this revenue stream. You know, it just, I'm curious.
Is that the name of the revenue stream that's actually specifically assigned to the incremental, the tax increment?
I don't know. This is just a fire district report and I just listened. I didn't ask any questions.
Interesting.
We can provide a very high level discussion of this. I'll remind the chair, this
Sure,
particular
sure.
item was not agendized.
yes,
So
of
if we can address at a very high level, and then perhaps that's something the chair would like us to agendize for the next meeting, the next regular meeting.
I can frame it in terms of the investment report, you know, as you're talking investment report. So yes, you're correct that there is the debt that we owe, it's outstanding. But we also get the property tax that equals the amount that we have to pay in the debt. So that comes in and goes right to pay the debt, and that's what it's there for, and that's what taxes is that's for the redevelopment agency. That's generally what ends up happening on the redevelopment, the RPTP F, or whatever they call it. That's a very normal process. Basically, the taxes assessed the homeowners from property tax values. That value then gets collected, that then gets passed down to us, and then we report to the state, yes, we paid that money and we use that money to pay for the debt, the end of story. It doesn't get put in an investment pool, it doesn't sit on the books for 12 months before we pay it out. We get the money in and we turn around and send it right, you know, basically send it right
Do
to.
you have any notion as to why city council instructed us to look at alternative ways of paying that when it's already kind of
I
structured?
wouldn't have any guess on that. I mean, just from a personal perspective, when I would say, I mean, it's an obligation that the city has to pay. So if they're just looking at it and saying, hey, we've got this small amount of bond debt that we need to pay or a loan that we need to pay off, then is there a way to pay it off faster?
Mhm.
And that might be the question. Like, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
But I thought we're sort of obliged to pay it with the identified tax increment.
I would like to.
That is why it's there.
As a topic where we can discuss it more, it's agendized and ask questions, because I have more questions, but I will refrain from asking them here. But yeah, if we could get an overview of it and maybe what is the current debt? You mentioned a 4-year payoff. If it somehow could be agendized, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. I think what I'd suggest is we do have a meeting coming up where we're going to talk about the annual report, and there will be more information on that piece of debt within those financials. So maybe after we've all had a chance to go through it and get ourselves up to speed on what it is and the history, we could, as part of that meeting, dive deeper into any questions we have on it. Because this is sort of our
Right.
securities investment portfolio. We're not gonna see that number here, and we're not using that money to pay off the debt either. So it's sort of two separate things. Okay, so if we don't have specific questions on the September investment report, Adrian, maybe we can see if there are any public comments on this.
I did have one question, I'm sorry. Did you say that the average, I should have read it, so forgive me, did you say that the average, what is the word, duration of the bonds is right now at 1.9 years?
1.93 years for the portfolio as of September 30th.
And their target average is more like 3 years?
The city has, within the investment policy, has guardrails on what the duration of the securities in the portfolio can be. And the max for is generally 5 years. So anything within that, within those guardrails can be part of the city's portfolio. And there's not necessarily an exact target within that. It's more of, it allows us a little bit of latitude to respond to the economic environment, the interest rate environment in the city's liquidity and short and long-term goals to, fit to like best kind of meet what is needed at that time. So if there's, we're hearing from our investment advisors that, hey, this is probably the top of the rate cycle, and that if we want to maximize yield without, compromising the city's ability to, have cash on hand as necessary to fulfill its obligations and all of those things, then maybe it's probably a good idea to have the portfolio a little bit longer so we can have a little bit more of those attractive, longer term interest rates and earn a little bit more of the principal.
So
Other
right now
comments?
it's a little shorter because we're about to plunge into committing to make it longer in order to, okay, thank you for explaining.
We want just overall economic market, when you talk about what's happened in the past year and a half, the securities have been very volatile, but the bonds have really produced, or maybe it's just opposite, I can't remember which way it is right now, but one of them has been really terrible, and I think it's mostly the bonds and the shorter term investments are the more stable ones are not producing the yield that they normally have, where the securities have been. And that's the ones that you go in and you do a lot more type of trading on those because you're trying to capitalize on those gains as much as possible and make sure that you get, you know, a good return on that. I mean, the
I'm
goal.
having trouble remembering if we actually hold any securities. I thought we were 100% fixed income, right? Okay.
You know,
We are.
sure.
It's only
Thank
these
you.
Day three,
I don't know. I didn't look at the investment
Yeah.
report, but, yeah. you know,
Sorry,
I didn't mean to catch you.
Okay,
Good point.
You're totally fine. I just totally get that. But you generally capitalize on the shorter term, you know, especially right now, instead of the long term, because of the interest rate return that you get on the longer term.
Yeah, we have
So
0%
the short-term
on
stuff right
absolute short-term bills and notes in this September 30th report.
Thank you.
Commissioner Day?
So in the report, it states, trying to parse what this means, the city has sufficient funds available to meet its expenditure requirements for the next 6 months. Does that mean that, you know, that's sort of typically the horizon of the assessment, or does this mean that, you know, there's potential sort of concerns about being able to meet expenditure requirements beyond 6 months?
That's just a requirement that the state has to say that we can meet expenditures for the next 6 months, or we have sufficient funds available, and it's one of the state treasurer.
So it's a statutory
Standard
statement.
Statutory requirement, it's a
Okay.
standard measure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go to public comment then.
All right, if you would like to comment on agenda item E2, review the September 30th, 2023 investment report and recommend receipt by city council. If you are logged in remotely, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or a landline, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment on agenda item E2. And I'm seeing no request for public comment. You may continue.
So it says I should open it up for discussion, but it seems we already answered a couple of questions. Anything else? We have comments, questions? Okay, well, if not, Adrian, could you please state the motion?
Certainly. Motion to recommend receipt of the September 30th, 2023 investment reports by city council.
Do I have a motion and a second for the motion?
A second.
I need a second.
A sec- Oh,
Or
I will make a motion. Commissioner Day will second it.
sounds good. So, we can take it to a vote. All in favor of receiving the report? Aye.
Aye.
Great. I think that concludes this item. The last item on regular business is to review the December 31st, 2023 investment report and recommend receipt by city council. Can I have Adrian introduce that topic?
Certainly. So we have our latest investment report here before you, which is the city's investment portfolio as of December 31st, 2023. So as of December 31st, 2023, the fair value of the city's portfolio was about 194,349,000. This is about 3.1 million less than the amortized cost basis. Again, this does not signify a transaction or a cash loss to the city, as we generally hold our securities to maturity. During this quarter, the yield on LAIF, the city's LAIF balance was 3.93%. On the city's managed assets, which are all of the securities that our investment advisor assists us with, the yield was about 3.08%, giving us an overall weighted portfolio average of 3.11% for the quarter. The average duration of the securities in the city's portfolio for this quarter was 1.86 years, so a little bit lower than the previous quarter. And the overall average ESG score for the city's portfolio holdings for this quarter went up slightly from 3.0 to 3.14. So again, on a scale from 1 to 5, 3 is average and 5 is best. So we're moving into it's a little bit of a higher rating than what we had in the previous quarter. And then looking a little bit more broadly at the economy and the kind of interest rate market, the Federal Reserve left rates unchanged at the 5.25 to 5.5 federal funds rate. Additionally, they also revised the what's called the dot plot, which is like where they target the short-term interest rates for each quarter. And within the latest dot plot projections, they're showing a more dovish outlook. So they've kind of incorporated 3 rate cuts for the year 2024. So the federal funds rate is expected to decrease in the coming year based on economic data that the Fed is looking at. Kind of in concert with that, their latest 2024 economic projections show lower near-term GDP growth. So economic activity slowing a little bit. And with that, they've also revised their inflation estimates down in the near term as well. Another key economic indicator is the labor market, and there have been signs of the labor market loosening a little bit. The number of openings per one unemployed person is the lowest that it's been since 2021 at 1.4 openings per one unemployed person, and the unemployment rate has decreased quarter over quarter from 3.9% to 3.7%. So based on the Fed's latest dot plot projection of the federal funds rate, long-dated interest rates have been falling, and all of these kind of factors point to a period of economic slowing, but not necessarily a recession, and moving more towards what the Fed has been targeting and what a lot of economists have been talking about as a soft landing, which is where economic activity slows a bit, the inflation kind of comes down, but we kind of hit that sweet spot where we are not necessarily in a recession, but we're not running hot as we had been seeing in the previous year.
Great. Thank you for that, Adrian. Really informative, well prepared. Any questions from commission members? Right, well, maybe we'll take it to public comment then.
If you would like to comment on agenda item E3, review the December 31st, 2023 investment reports and recommend receipt by City Council. If you are logged in virtually, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment on item E3. And I'm seeing no request for public comment at this time. You may continue.
Great. Lynn, did you have a question? No. I think with that, we can sort of take it to a vote. Do I have a motion and a second for the stated? Oh, sorry, Adrian, please take the motion.
Motion to recommend receipt of the December 31st, 2023 investment report by City Council.
Put forth the motion, and we need someone to second it.
I'll second.
And then we can take it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. All right, I think We are now at our last item, which is commissioner reports. And I will invite Vice Chair Wilson to present our subcommittee report from 2021 on OpenGov.
So Chair Wong and I reviewed, so OpenGov, if you're not aware, is a website that you can access from the city's website that has a whole bunch of financial information. And what we did is we reviewed that in pretty great detail and came up with a number of recommendations and observations based on that review. And so that's what this is. It's a summary of some of our observations. You just want me to run through it?
Yeah, sure.
So there were 4 sort of main high-level items that we identified. The first, I think, may have sort of self-corrected itself over the last couple of years. And it was that the OpenGov link was hard to find on the Menlo Park City website. It took me a while to try to figure out where it was when I first went on there. It seems like it's now up. If you go up and you click on the right-hand side, it's one of the main options. So I think that's much better than before, where I had to navigate through multiple pages to find it. So I think that's a much better place. I did note, however, that it was hard to find, like it just says OpenGov. And so to somebody who's not familiar with what that is, if I'm just a regular resident and I'm looking for financial information, I'm not involved in this committee, I wouldn't know that that's where I would go to find that. So I do think it would be helpful to somehow clarify or define or it may make it clear that that's where all of the city's financial data resides. Because I wouldn't otherwise know that it's called OpenGov. Second item was that the information presented on the OpenGov portal was not user-friendly. Once you click on the portal, you're taken to a list of, it's just a lot of charts and graphs and numbers that are disconnected from any narrative that describes what the user is looking at. For example, defined terminology, explanations of year-over-year variance, et cetera. We recommend further exploring the types of financial information residents are most interested in and questions most frequently received on the city's financials and providing quick links to the appropriate view so users do not need to navigate through the internet report. There was some sections, if I recall, there's graphs and numbers, and then you'd have to navigate somewhere else to review more of a narrative about that section. And so it just wasn't intuitive. And it was hard to, I'm like, everybody in this room are financial people. And so I think it made more sense to me, like I understood more about what I was looking at. But, again, if I'm just looking at from a non-financial perspective, I think I would need a little bit more definition or what those numbers are looking at. The third was that we thought a frequently asked questions page would be helpful. There isn't one currently. Users who are not familiar with manipulating data visualization tables might find it difficult to do so without any training or frequently asked questions page. An FAQ page would be a helpful reference point for users that are not familiar with the OpenGov technology. The Menlo Park City School District actually does have a nice FAQ page that may be leveraged for this purpose. And then the last item was just the lack of training resources available to users. And so we thought this actually dovetailed with the FAQ suggestion, which is to have some sort of live or online trainings on how to use the system to increase engagement from the community. You could record them and have them available. So those were the 4 high-level observations that we had.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Years ago during the pandemic.
What becomes of your recommendations now that you have them?
I think
Good question. Sure.
it up for discussion and, to the extent we all agree on some of the recommendations by Chair Remington set out, we can kind of, we're still a subcommittee, so I guess you and I will figure out, how to action the recommendations along with city staff.
What if we make sure there was a link to OpenGov from the FAC page on the website? Because maybe people would come to our little webpage to find financial information and right in there.
I mean, even our website's hard to find. You gotta go into agendas, which it makes no sense to me,
Makes
but sorry, that's not agenda.
But if people find their way to us,
Yeah.
then they should be able to find it. Then we would like to
We should
make.
reward them.
We should.
With more financial. That is your reward.
More charts and data.
Well, I have a few comments. So the upcoming budget process, I mean, June is, no doubt work is already underway behind the scenes. So that is an opportunity to, build in additional ways, maybe to educate the public, like some towns, for example, they have multiple budget related meetings where they focus on different parts of the budget. Like I think Atherton has done that in the past. I mean, they're just different ways of going about it so that people feel they can ask questions. It's interactive. And I've been at meetings where we got the budget at the meeting, literally, it was just printed. And then others where they had a very, a lot of time for questions, however long people were there, they were going to say. So there's, kind of a spectrum. And then I'm curious about some information that used to be there that isn't there anymore, and that would be our check register, or the equivalent of the city's checkbook.
That used to be on there, public, you could just
Yeah.
see all the payments. that were
Yeah,
made.
there is actually a line item, but it's not live, and I know it used to be there. It wasn't easy to find, but it was there, and I think for transparency's sake, that's important to have, and some agencies see that, like the fire board. They get that every other month, and they have a management consultant that recommended they see it monthly. I think they call it vendor payments, but it was essentially the check, like the check register.
Do we know when it was taken off or why it was no longer online? Was there a specific reason behind that?
I don't have more information on that. I know the city website was transitioned about a year ago, maybe last October. And so that might have been an unintended consequence of the website migration. And maybe something with the reporting tool that needs to get tweaked to assist. But we'd have to look more into that item.
Yeah, I think it sounds like quite a simple fix if it was a website migration glitch and if we already have the information and it has been on the website, then I think, to your point, Lynn, I don't see why it wouldn't make sense to include it back. Although that's not open specific. We can. Any other questions and comments?
I think it falls into the purview of OpenGov
Yeah.
evaluation, the fact that it's hard to find us. If it's, something that, you're talking about, the fact that, the different commissions that make up the part of the city are not, findable, that's, I guess, a somewhat related issue of being able to access the information about the city. And maybe ends that.
Commissioner Day, I think you something out.
I just spent a few minutes looking at OpenGov as you were speaking. And I agree with all of the commentary. I think it's informative, but it is not accessible necessarily. I think there's work to be done to make the information accessible by way of, so adding more commentary to the data, so as well as, providing outreach and training. So it's good if you really understand what raw numbers are, you more or less understand what the terminology is. But in doing a more qualitative analysis and then furthering more outreach and training would be helpful as a first set of steps.
Do most cities use OpenGov? Like, is that pretty standard? No? Oh, okay.
No, I think there's been a large push towards finding ways to add transparency to city budgets. because it is so complex. Many cities, it's a PDF. And
Yeah.
and you have to look at the PowerPoint presentation and that's what you get, and it's once a year. So OpenGov was a tremendous step forward, that the city council, asked, directed staff to implement, to help with that transparency. There might be other tools you're aware of.
Yeah, so there's a number of transparency tools that are available. I mean, depending on the government, there's OpenGov, where I can list off around 5 or 6 of them. It just depends on the ERP software that you have as well. And we have the ERP OpenGov, so it just naturally transitions to OpenGov transparency. So it's just a matter of getting things set up and fleshed out how we need them through OpenGov, so.
I would add, I think it's like how our website is currently used and how OpenGov pops up under the menu as OpenGov. But if you would go under departments and into admin services finance, you'll find the budget book, which then links you to the OpenGov sites with the narratives that you need. So it's just it's kind of hidden and worked around. Maybe that needs to be pulled out in front.
Yeah, maybe just a
The
way.
landing page is what we really
Yeah.
need to start with first before we jump into all the tables and stuff like. Sure.
Yeah.
Day 3 observation.
No, the points of the commission are well taken. I think different users come to the website and will approach it differently. Some might just type in commission or finance or budget or go to the menu and be trying to search. And so, and I know it is difficult, when the web redesign was occurring, to try to think through those different avenues. So I think it's built in intentionally to have multiple ways to find the different information and navigate there, but certainly your points are well taken to try to make it easier, because we've heard just now there's 3 different ways that this team went to find the data, and some are maybe less obvious than others.
I would relate it. I think training would be helpful, or outreach. I mean, just because people might, the average, I suspect many non-financial professionals are reluctant to ask questions. And even just some kind of guidance in terms of, just kind of overview enough where they, or maybe even our council members, I don't know, by now they're probably familiar, but where people have enough context to be able to ask questions, because I can imagine someone holding back who might have a question. So I don't know what that might look like, and I'm not suggesting more work. But like at that meeting, the former city manager way back, this is several back, mentioning no names, but we all received the document at the meeting. No one had a chance to look at it beforehand. And later, within a week, I heard the person announce at a council meeting proudly, well, there were no questions at that budget meeting. Well, of course, there are no questions. Who's going to ask a question? You know what I mean? But I think there was a disconnect. The person, maybe in that person's mind, they thought that was a good thing, but no, it was for another reason. There were no questions. You know what I mean? So.
I don't mind putting a little plug, just as a reminder for anyone who's listening too, that we do have our budget workshop each year where the department heads go through their budget. We talk about the city council priorities for that budget year and kind of how our projects or operations are supporting those priorities. I think we had a great turnout last year. And so we encourage as many people to attend that as possible and get that one-on-one time for questions. It's a really in-depth study session of the budget each year.
And when's that happening?
I believe the date for this year is May 23rd.
Okay.
Definitely, certainly late May. Maybe early June, one of those 2 weeks.
I was just thinking if we, are able to make the improvements to OpenGov before that day, we might just be able to do a little promotion on OpenGov at that meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Either through like flyers or, a little booth, like ask questions about OpenGov and they through that. Commissioner Day, I think you kind of had your hand up for a little bit.
I was just gonna say, add to my own comment and say, yes.
it's a big step forward in providing, that level of detail in via OpenGov. So it wasn't taking away from the fact that that there's a lot of really good information publicly available, and the commentary is how to make it. So
So I don't think this item requires a vote, anything like that. And if there are no other comments, I guess Vice Chair Norrington and I will take this back and we'll figure out what to do next and come back with an update when we have one. And that is the last item on our agenda this evening, so,
But Brittany said we could, this is where we raise comments.
oh,
Is that correct?
I
No?
may have been mistaken. I
Okay.
thought that the section was commissioner comments and as I'm seeing
okay.
it's commissioner reports, so I think likely the appropriate path forward for questions would be the standard process of contacting the chair and or the staff liaison.
Well, okay, but what kind of response can we expect? Like if we suggest an agenda topic, what should be our expectations regarding a response to that? I mean, should we write the chair and the chair writes you, or what is that?
so I think Lynn's question is just what the general process is of adding an item on the agenda.
And asking even questions like when our work plan, what deliverables are due, I don't know. Just like a frame, when would the council expect to see something? Who do we ask and what can we expect about an answer?
I'll let Brittany jump in because I do think some of the questions are more for
Okay,
staff than
okay,
for other commission members, but.
Absolutely. And so what I'm hearing is that it might be beneficial to add a review of the work plan to an upcoming agenda, which would allow us to provide the commission with the city council procedures, again, to refresh the commission's mind on what is outlined for the FAC and how to ask questions, the process that really guides this commission and all other commissions here at the city, following that city council procedure. The processes outlined in that is to direct those questions to our city council liaison, and then the city council or I apologize, the staff liaison for the commission, then Adrian would compile those questions, those requests for agenda topics and present that to the chair. The chair, as the head of the meeting, does determine that what is put on the agenda.
And does that help or?
so it sounds like we write Adrian and he compiles that and presents it to you. So maybe we could copy you when we write him, just, as another data point. Okay, so it sounds like that is the general process. I recall it's April, they're expecting something, just from memory, if we're pointed back to those procedures, but I'll go back to them.
Yes, so there's a couple of things outlined in the city council procedure. So on an annual basis, the work plan is brought to the city council for approval. So they did review that for this period that we're in. So we have those 13 items that reviewed. I know that the frequency of the meetings was something that was discussed as part of that before finalizing the work plan to present to the city council a few months ago. And that's where those subcommittees of work plan items were put on there.
There's also the commissioner reports to the city council, which are a minimum of one is required. But there can be, I think, two. And they are supposed to take place before September 1st of each year. So that's also another part of the kind of work plan procedure.
So depending on the chair and the commission, a report to the council could be brought on the item that the commission just discussed with OpenGov, for example, in a report out from the commission.
So I think, one thing is I would encourage all the subcommittees, to the extent you do have something to present or a report to the commission, maybe let Adrian know, copying me, and we could put a special meeting on the agenda. So, we don't have to wait for a regular meeting to happen, because I know you're all within your subcommittees, have questions, have things coming up. So, I'd rather keep this dynamic, and we'll just work on a time that works for everyone to meet, to the extent there's anything we want to talk about, or if you have any findings or updates.
And if I may, Chair, there are some rules regarding what can be discussed at special meetings versus regular meetings. So I might consult with the city clerk's office as well for those Brown Act restrictions. For instance, in my mind, as I'm recalling, special meetings are generally something of a time-sensitive nature where something needs to be addressed before the next regularly scheduled meeting. So I would just want to get clarification from our city clerks and city attorney's office for that.
Yeah, and I would be interested in just understanding what time sensitive is, for example, to the extent we want to action something before X date, because it's the best time to do it for everyone. Is that sort of time sensitive?
I'll certainly direct that question to our city attorney.
Thank you. There's nothing else. I guess I'll move to adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Seconded.
All in favor? Thank you, and thank you, city staff, for all the preparation for this meeting. Really, it's all good stuff.